Hey everyone, so let's do this again. It seems like there was a lot of questions based on my previous video about the new CASP or crypto asset service provider rules published by the SEC earlier this week. And I feel like I need to kind of clarify a lot of the things that I was talking about and explaining in my previous video. If you haven't seen the previous video, I think you can kind of skip it because there's a lot of stuff that I learned just today that are going to really kind of override a lot of the thoughts that I had in that video. If you're wondering where I got this new information, I actually did visit the SEC earlier today. I got some clarification directly in person from the Philly FinTech office, which is the group that authors these CASP rules. And I think I kind of really understand now where they were coming from with this new rule set. So if you did see the previous video, that was the title of that was is the SEC banning crypto education. So it turns out this is totally it doesn't matter. This is not the question we should be asking. So if you are worried about this, don't worry. That's not it, right? And I was technically correct when I said that the answer to the question was no, but it's also the wrong question to be asking. Okay, so let's dive in again into the document. But actually, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to talk about this one particular section. This is the most important section in the entire document, in my opinion. And I'm just going to read the entire thing to you guys. Crypto assets shall not be sold, offered for sale, or distributed in the Philippines without complying with these rules and the CASP guidelines. And this is, it seemed kind of harmless when I was first reading it, but actually, it is really fundamental. So let's talk about the Philippine crypto ecosystem first, right? And I think we kind of already understand most of this, but let's just say this, right? So there are basically two types of exchanges in the Philippines. There's local and there's international. You know the names of the local ones. There's Coins, there's PDAX, there's Gcrypto, that's us. There's Maya. And then there's some smaller ones. Moneybees is the other, which probably most of you don't really deal with because they're very OTC. And then there's DA5. And then there's a couple of other ones that aren't really completely operational, right? And that's basically it for the local ecosystem. Now, international, of course, there's lots. There's many, many, many more, right? The ones that, like off the top of my head, OKX, there's BitGet, there's Bybit. What are the other big ones? KuCoin. I guess I'll also put Binance, although technically Binance is banned here. And then many others. Many others, right? The first and most important provision in these rules is that the service provider or the CASP must be incorporated in the PH in the Philippines. That is kind of one of the biggest requirements, right? And only then, once they are incorporated in the Philippines, they can be licensed by the SEC, but also the BSP, right? So it's by the BSP plus the SEC using their respective licensing frameworks, the VASP for the BSP and then the CASP for the SEC. And only then, once these two requirements are fulfilled, can they offer crypto that are not scams. It is actually really important to the SEC that the cryptocurrencies that are offered are not scams, they're not rug pulls. I think that's kind of a very important part because one of the reasons why there's penalties and fines and things like that listed in this document is because we need to know what happens if you did inadvertently promote or offer scam coin, right? So let's go back to the list, right? Let's look at our local players and our international players. So I think the basic problem is that I don't think that the international exchanges like OKX or BitGet or Bybit are going to get licensed here. I think that the problem is even without their license, they continued to make their full service available, and I don't think that is a great way to, make peace with the regulators. Technically speaking, to offer crypto exchange services in the Philippines is illegal if you don't have the VASP license. If any Philippine company tried to do that, they would immediately get penalized and fined and shut down by the SEC. But the thing about OKX and BitGet and Bybit, etc., is that they can do that because they have no company to shut down here in the Philippines. They are just using the internet itself as a way to reach Filipinos. And I can see both sides of it. I know that the Filipino community loves these brands. I know that we love OKX and Bybit and BitGet, et cetera, right? We love these brands because what? They're cheaper. And honestly, I cannot argue with that. They're definitely cheaper. But possibly the reason why they're cheaper is because they don't have to comply with any of the laws here. They don't have to pay taxes here. And to a certain extent, they get to enjoy the economies of scale of being a global operation, right? Where what did I see recently? Like these guys were doing like, I think it was BitGet. They were doing $20 billion a day in volume. $20 billion, that's half of the Philippine volume in a year. And BitGet sees that every single day. And that's just BitGet. I mean, these other guys are probably doing, similar numbers. I guess that's kind of where the SEC's head is at, right? They want to be able to get this stuff under control, right? In a way that will allow them to continue to exercise their jobs as a commission that supposedly should be able to protect financial consumers. They can't do that if the businesses that are offering services to those Filipino financial consumers are not located in the Philippines in any way, shape, or form. There's no entity that they can supervise, there's no entity that they can investigate. In the event that there was an incident where, a scam was listed on one of these exchanges, the SEC would normally need to be able to step in and investigate what happened. How did this mistake get made? And, why did people lose money, et cetera, et cetera. They need to be able to do that, but they can't do that because OKX is not here. So I guess that's the missing piece. Because it's unlikely that they will incorporate here, it's unlikely that they will get licensed here. It's also therefore unlikely that they will be able to continue offering crypto here. The bottom line is it needs to be incorporated here in the Philippines as a business, and then it needs to apply for licenses from the BSP and the SEC. If it can't do that, then the enforcement part of the rules will then take effect. And that's the part where, they kind of do. I think I discussed that in the previous video. I was talking about things like, where did I put that? Yeah, there will be investigation, there will be a cease and desist, there could be hearings, there could be a contempt order if they don't comply. And then eventually the SEC would need to be able to suspend their license or their business. But in the case of a foreign company, they can't suspend it. They can't suspend you because you don't exist here in the Philippines, right? And then finally, some kind of payback or return of funds to the customers. None of this stuff is possible because we could not even get past number 1 or number 2, right? And that's kind of where this is really, really critical for everyone in the crypto industry, because your favorite exchanges, the international exchanges, are not going to be able to comply with these unless, I mean, I suppose they could start right now, right? They could start right now. They could start applying for both the CASP. Well, they can't apply for the VASP because that license isn't currently being offered by the BSP. So they can apply for this, but then you kind of need both in order to be able to offer your full exchange services. Otherwise, you would not be able to accept peso, which is kind of a problem if you are based in the Philippines. So that's why you need the VASP license. So what does this mean for influencers, creators, promoters? So the bottom line is this. There's two things, right? You should only work for CASPs. And this is kind of obvious now based on everything that I've said above, right? If a particular exchange or platform is not a registered CASP, then they could eventually get blocked or banned by the SEC. So you as an influencer, it makes the most sense to only work for CASPs because otherwise you would be promoting a brand or a platform that literally becomes inaccessible within the next I don't know, year or whatever. I mean, obviously, again, this is the part where I am theorizing. I don't know how long it's going to take for the enforcement part of this conversation to actually happen. But the other thing is you should be incorporated in the Philippines. So you should have a business entity. And the business entity does not need to be a CASP. You're not a CASP. You're just a promoter, right? So very likely your business category would be something like marketing firm. That's basically it. Those are the basic requirements for influencers, creators, or promoters. So what if you were not a professional? What if you were just like a fan, right? What about the fans? People who just like a particular protocol or token or blockchain, or they like a particular Web3 game. They just really like talking to people on the internet about it, posting about it, or engaging with other fans like them. Should be okay. So don't worry about being a fan. That's not, that's not going to be the issue here. I think the biggest indicator that you are a professional promoter or a professional marketer or a professional influencer is when you are actually receiving some kind of compensation from the projects that you were talking about. Now, they actually kind of define that compensation does not always just mean money. It could be other things like, it could be information. It could come in the form of non-monetary benefits like big gifts or things like that. So anyway, but the point is that, if you're a professional, you probably know it, right? You probably know that you're a professional because you have been receiving some income or revenue from this particular part of your job. A fan probably will not have that kind of confusion in their brain because they don't receive compensation for that particular part of their job. Or maybe if they do, it's incredibly small, or it's not, it's not substantial enough for them to leave their day job, right? So yeah, I don't think that's a problem, and I think you should be fine. Okay, so now let's talk about the next 6 to 12 months. What do I think is going to happen now that the CASP rules are out there, now that we know what the requirements are, and now that we know what the actual enforcement policies and actions might be? Unfortunately, this is not the message that you guys were hoping for. I think that what will happen is that we will see a number of exchange bans, and they will likely begin with the most popular exchanges out there, right? They're not going to start from the bottom. They're going to start from the top. We already got a preview of that with the Binance ban from last year. I think that what we'll eventually see here is that it will kind of continue on down that list. Now, I realize that's not great news, and I'm also very aware of the fact that I'm sitting here talking to you guys wearing a G crypto hat. So maybe for the rest of this I'll just remove this. It's funny because I'm just as affected by these potential international exchange shutdowns as any of you guys. I've got accounts with all of these exchanges, and not because I'm doing research, because I genuinely like using their platforms, and sometimes they have tokens that only they have, right? And that's the reason why I'm there. I understand the convenience for sure. This is going to be a really tricky time for the Philippine crypto landscape. I think that over the next year, a lot of things are going to change. And really, the only thing I can guarantee, at least at this moment, is that we understand, and I guess I can speak for G Crypto to a certain extent. I can't really speak for the rest of the local exchanges, but I would like to think that they agree with me on this. We understand how heavy the weight of responsibility is to the Philippine public, that we provide better, more competitive, more efficient, more affordable crypto services. And certainly we're going to try our best to make it so that you don't feel as shortchanged as you currently do by listening to the first half of this video, right, where you feel like the best exchanges are now being forcibly withdrawn from the Philippines. What people often forget is that exchanges and any business really, they're made up of people, people like me and my team, and the team at PDAX, the team at Coins. They're all people. They're all people like you, very likely, who really like crypto, believe in crypto, and want to make this stuff accessible. I don't think it's impossible for our exchanges to do better. And I think that given that the competitive landscape is going to change very, very drastically over the next year, we need to get our act together. So that's it, everyone. Thanks for listening, Crypto Fam. Catch you in the next one.